Hello gentlemen, this is MGTOW. One of the things that I have struggled with is finding a credible picture of the future that involves humans in a state unshackled by the chains of hypergamy and gynocentrism. Numerous MGTOW, including Stardust, Barbarossa and Coltane, have produced excellent content which explain very credibly the survival pressures that helped us make it thus far, the resource scarcity that led to the human pair bond we call marriage, and the technological innovations that ultimately led to its dissolution. My goal today is to address the capacity of our species to move beyond these twin issues that led to the rise of MGTOW. That is, can we envisage a future where 1. We are able to maintain an advanced post-industrial civilization, and 2. Simultaneously have done away with the twin norms of hypergamy and gynocentrism, and 3. Where humans have political systems that genuinely aim to benefit both sexes, and 4. The battle of the sexes has stopped and mutual exploitation between the genders is perhaps replaced by a milder form of reciprocal altruism. My goal is to partially speculate on how we might get there, while also giving my opinion on likelihood. Before I start, I think it's important to reiterate the fact that when studying the human ape, or any species for that matter, we must do so, firstly, within the context of survival pressures. That is, you cannot understand an animal unless its survival pressures are taken into context. And secondly, by fully acknowledging that internal drivers shape external behavior and vice versa. That is, we must not allow ourselves to be drawn into the false dichotomy of nature versus nurture. They are one and the same. Keeping in mind then that gynocentrism is a structure with foundations built on sexual dimorphism, that is, the condition where two sexes of the same species exhibit different characteristics beyond the differences in their sexual organs. This is manifest in humans both anatomically. For example, the male of our species is on average physically stronger, and also psychologically, whereby the genders employ different tools to meet their most pressing needs. Let's carry out a thought experiment. Assume today is ground zero, and this time in the future when humans are free of the issues we see today is, let's say, the year 3500. This ground zero is characterized by, firstly, a very literal, real and ongoing war on men, male sexuality and masculinity. 2. A separation of punishment from wrongdoing for men. 3. Rampant misandry, male debtors' prisons. 4. Male poverty, homelessness, and an epidemic of male suicide. And 5. Being on the wrong end of affirmative action quotas and a myriad of other social disadvantages simply for being a man. And this nirvana time in the future, this year 3500, is characterized by, firstly, a societal-wide system of meritocracy. Secondly, punishments are applied uniformly without respect to gender by the state. Thirdly, the human sexual pair bonds is based on common interests without the state as a third-party actor. And fourthly, the extent to which there is a state, the benefits of taxation and state revenues are shared equally by members of the society, again, without respect to gender. It's very, very clear that to get from point A, this ground zero of today, to point B, this year 3500, one of two things must happen. That is, firstly, humans must evolve past our current point, since of course nature versus nurture is a false dichotomy. Or, secondly, a third-party force, perhaps extraterrestrial, must impose these norms upon our species and prevent deviation from these idealized goals. Since the latter is of course strictly within the realm of science fiction, let's focus on the first, and that is, to what extent are humans capable of evolving past gynocentrism, male disposability, and hypergamy, and how long might it take? In answering such a question, one might consider that the three critical factors that drive evolution in any population are: number 1, genetic variation between individuals; number 2, natural selection; and number 3, sexual recombination. Absence of any one of these factors either dramatically curtails the evolutionary process or halts it in its current state. Furthermore, when one examines the process of evolution, we see 4 basic mechanisms. That is, firstly, natural selection; secondly, genetic drift; thirdly, mutation; and finally, the gene flow. That is, for us to reach this year 3500 nirvana, either one or a combination of these 4 processes above must achieve the following. That is, firstly, they must remove the anatomical differences between men and women. Secondly, equip members of both genders with a similar psychological strategy to cope with their most basic survival pressures, including, of course, the species-wide adoption of the male, female, or a yet-to-be-determined reproductive strategy. Thirdly, equip the male of the species with the ability to carry a fetus to term, or render the female of the species unable to do so, and thereby forcing the species to rely on exogenous reproductive technologies. Now, while this is certainly not impossible, it does seem very unlikely, especially when one considers that in a practical sense, humans have stopped evolving. Yes, you did hear me correctly. Evolution for the human species has actually come to a halt, perhaps temporarily, or more likely, permanently. One of the 3 critical components of the evolutionary process has been voluntarily suspended by the common human stock, and that is, of course, number 2, which was natural selection. For a brief second, pause this video and consider firstly the environment that most humans either live in or aspire to live in, and then compare that with the external environment that animals live in. Adaptation, the kind that humans would have to undergo to do away with gynocentrism and hypergamy, in a simpler sense, is a mechanism that allows an organism to mediate the stresses of its own environment to ensure survival and reproduction. We often think that adaptation takes place through direct genetic modifications in response to environmental stress. However, many animal species are able to accommodate environmental stress simply by changing their behavior in response to environmental conditions without the need to resort to genetic adaptation. This could involve modifications as simple as moving to another area, changing annual or daily activities, or changing the strategies for food acquisition. If behavioral flexibility can't accommodate environmental stress, animals also have a range of physiological mechanisms that help them respond, again without the need for genetic adaptation. Examples include adaptive changes in heart rate, respiration, and the accumulation of body fat. In combination, behavioral and physiological flexibility form a 2-tiered defense against environmental stress. These mechanisms might be linked to the regulation of genes, but their variability might be mediated by environmental conditions without changes in gene frequency. If these defenses fail or only partially buffer against environmental stress, then survivorship or reproductive rates may vary. In this case, changes in genetic frequencies will occur over time and evolution will then take place. So the million-dollar question that we might ask, my friends, is how do humans fit into this 2-tiered system of defense against environmental stress? It's clear that we have developed an extensive dependence on culture and technology that has allowed us to populate the most extreme environments worldwide. However, our dependence on technology can be seen as different to that of other species, in that our capacity for cumulative cultural change, which provides greater potential to remove humans from a direct relationship with the natural world. Since the origins of agriculture, the rate of technological progress has increased, perhaps exponentially. agriculture originated independently within the past 12,000 years in various parts of the world, and the surplus of food resulting from agriculture has allowed people to specialize in different tasks, and has provided greater scope for innovation and cultural transmission. The technological achievements of our contemporary and industrialized society still, of course, rest on our agricultural production system and the effective distribution of food resources. In turn, these technologies allow us to modify our environment so effectively that many have argued that we have removed our species from nature. Gene frequencies might still change over time through random factors such as genetic drift, but if our culture has so effectively removed and inoculated us from environmental stress, then natural selection will no longer occur. However, it's important to remember that our ability to adapt to environmental stress is contingent on the availability and the distribution of resources and energy. Regarding the second tier of environmental buffering, there is evidence that humans have psychological characteristics that allow them to adapt efficiently to different or changing environments. The ability to cook food provides humans with a greater dietary flexibility than chimpanzees or gorillas. This dietary flexibility and the extensive use of meat has allowed humans to converge on a common adaptive niche and to survive in a greater range of environments. Humans also show greater flexibility in growth and have larger stores of body fat than any other species, both of which increase our ability to survive short-term environmental fluctuations. We have greater variability in fertility and birth spacing, which allows populations to bounce back quickly after periods of high mortality, and there is increasing evidence that environmental conditions can alter the regulation of specific genes. All of these physiological features allow us to respond to environmental stress without the need for genetic adaptation by natural selection. So we might ask, again, are we still evolving? And the answer is a resounding no. Humans are not routinely faced with the kinds of environmental stresses that necessitate adaptation. So what would have to happen to get us to this ideal society which I envisaged in the year 3500? Well, firstly, our culture would have to undergo significant change, forcing humans closer to environmental stress. Under these conditions, natural selection may once again reoccur. For example, if we faced substantial limitations on the availability and the distribution of resources and energy. Secondly, our culture would have to abandon current norms of morality and artificially adopt animal-like norms of natural selection by abandoning, perhaps, modern medicine or withholding of care from the sick and dying. Thirdly, our planet would have to become less agriculturally productive, perhaps due to a catastrophic climate change. And lastly, humans would have to adapt our culture to deliberately marginalize unfavored groups economically and technologically, thereby increasing selection pressures with high mortality. I will say, however, that even if all of these factors coincide to force genetic change that leads to profound evolutionary bursts, it is very, very unlikely to dramatically change gynocentrism or hypergamy due to the fact that we are still a sexually reproducing species, and as a result, the female of the species will still be the limiting factor in reproduction. So in ending this video, do we care to speculate what the year 3500 might look like based on the current evolutionary trend of our species or lack thereof? Well, firstly, a literal war on men, male sexuality and masculinity. Secondly, a separation of punishment from wrongdoing for men. Thirdly, rampant misandry and male debtors' prisons. Fourthly, male poverty, homelessness, and suicide. And lastly, affirmative action quotas and social advantages for being a woman, as well as social disadvantages for being a man. Thank you very, very much. This is CS MGTOW.
No.
Is there something wrong with me? It's my weight, isn't it?
No, you're great. Just the way you are.
Erectile dysfunction is more common than you think.
especially due to the fatigue and alcohol abuse that often accompanies taking home a large, needy girl from the bar late at night. That's why there's Mollis. Don't let your penis let you down. Mollis overrides the dignity and disgust that often result from a sexual encounter with a desperate girl. So you can have the confidence and stamina to make an impression that lasts.
Wow, that was incredible. Can I see you tomorrow?
Yeah, listen, could you use the back door so my friends don't see you?
Asshole!
Ask your bartender about Mollis, or order online from any number of disreputable Mexican pharmacists. Mollis is Vesuvius citrate and should be taken with alcohol. Mollis, respect be damned.
I'm a mom, so I often cheat on my husband when he's at work.
The Trackify homing tracking beacon can send instant location updates to your phone, so you know if your wife is at a rest area taking it in the can from a stranger. Trackify's innovative GPS locator chip is implanted at the base of their head, so there's nothing to lose. Get the trust and peace of mind you deserve. Trackify, love just got a little easier to keep track of.